Okay, so you know those weight loss drugs, the ones like Ozempic and Wegovy, that seem to be absolutely everywhere.
Yeah, they're huge right now. Big news for diabetes and weight management. Revolutionary, really.
Totally. But what if there's another layer to the story? Something maybe unexpected connecting them to, well, our mental health.
That's exactly where some new research is heading. It's quite compelling, actually. There's a study out now looking specifically at that GLP-1 drugs and a potential link to depression risk.
Right, because we mostly hear about the weight loss, the blood sugar control. That's kind of the main story.
That's the headline, yeah.
But for this deep dive, we're really zoning in on this one study. It was published in the journal Current Neuropharmacology, and it kind of suggests we need to look beyond just the physical stuff.
Hmm.
So our mission today is to unpack what this research actually found, and importantly, what it might mean for you, especially if you're taking these drugs or even just thinking about them.
Absolutely. And to really get into that, we probably need to quickly cover how these GLP-1 drugs actually, well, work.
Good idea. Lay it out for us.
Okay, so GLP-1, that stands for glucagon-like peptide 1. It's a hormone our body makes naturally. These drugs, they basically just mimic it.
Okay, mimic a natural hormone.
Yeah.
And what does that hormone do?
Well, it does two key things. It helps regulate blood sugar, which is obviously important for diabetes, and it also tells your brain you're full, reducing appetite.
Got it. So tapping into the body's own system makes sense why they're effective, but here's the twist from the study, right? Dopamine.
Exactly. This is where it gets interesting. The study suggests these drugs don't just work on appetite signals, they might also interact with parts of the brain linked to dopamine.
Dopamine. That's the feel-good chemical, right? Pleasure, reward.
That's the one. Think, the satisfaction from eating something tasty or achieving a goal, that kind of reward feeling.
Okay, so the researchers think these drugs could mess with dopamine levels.
That's the suggestion.
Yeah.
They might somehow disrupt the normal dopamine balance in the brain.
What happens if dopamine gets disrupted? What's the potential fallout?
Well, this is the serious part. The study proposes this disruption could potentially increase the risk of depression and even suicidal thoughts.
Wow. Yeah.
And this is important, particularly in people who might already have lower dopamine function. They call it hypodopaminergia.
Hypodopaminergia. So like if your dopamine system isn't running at full power already.
Exactly. The thinking is these drugs might push it even lower. Like your analogy earlier, if the fuel tank's already low, this could potentially drain it more.
That's a really crucial distinction. So it's not necessarily a risk for everyone.
Right. The study actually hints that for people with high dopamine activity, hyperdopaminergia, the effect might be different, maybe even beneficial in some contexts. But for those on the lower end, it could be problematic. It's definitely not painted as a simple cause and effect for everybody.
Okay, that nuance is key.
Mhm.
And they didn't just stop at the dopamine idea, did they? They looked at genetics too.
They did. They found some potential genetic associations linking these GLP-1 agonists with genes like DRD3, BDNF, and CRB1.
And those genes aren't random, are they? They're involved in mood, reward.
Precisely. They play known roles in regulating mood and those dopamine-related reward pathways. BDNF, for instance, is really important for keeping brain cells healthy, especially in areas related to mood.
So the idea is that using these drugs long-term, chronically, could somehow throw that dopamine signaling out of whack.
That's the hypothesis explored in the study, that chronic use could lead to this dysregulation, this imbalance, and that could potentially manifest as depression, mood problems, or even suicidal ideation, SI.
Okay, this is pretty heavy stuff. What are the experts saying? The ones cited in the article reporting on this study, they must have opinions.
Oh, absolutely. They're definitely not brushing it off. There's Alireza Sharafshah, for example. He voices caution about this idea of constantly stimulating the body with these agonists.
Right, and wasn't there someone who used quite strong language?
Yes, Dr. Kenneth Blum. He gives a serious warning to doctors, urging them to be really careful when prescribing these. He talks about avoiding a potential tragic wave of people dying to lose weight. That's pretty stark language.
It really is. It underlines the seriousness of the potential concern. And Dr. Mark S. Gold.
He kind of echoes that need for caution, emphasizing that this research is critical evidence. He suggests we need to reevaluate the widespread use and specifically calls for regulatory bodies like the FDA to consider these findings for drug labeling and monitoring.
So a call for official review based on this evidence, that's significant.
It is, but it's also crucial to remember, as Sharafshah points out in the article, this whole link between GLP-1 drugs and depression or SI. It's still debated.
Right, it's not universally accepted yet.
Exactly. There's research pointing different ways, some negative reports, maybe some positive ones in certain contexts too. The science is still evolving here.
So this study isn't the final word by any means.
Not at all. Think of it more as a strong signal. It's raising important questions and highlighting a need for much more investigation into the mental health impacts.
Okay. It's flagging a potential issue that needs a closer look.
That's really the core takeaway for you listening. This research points to a potential concern. It doesn't prove causation, but it definitely says, hey, we need to look into this much more deeply. We need to understand all the effects, intended and potentially unintended.
Right. So let's try and sum this up. The essence of this deep dive, based on this study, is there's a potential link suggested between drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy and a higher risk of depression.
Yes, and that link seems connected to how these drugs might affect dopamine in the brain.
And critically, this risk might be greater for people who already have lower dopamine function, that hypodopaminergic state.
Correct. And alongside that, we heard clear calls from some experts for caution, for more research to really understand what's going on.
It definitely makes you appreciate the complexity of medical treatments. It's always this balance, isn't it?
Yes.
Weighing the benefits against potential risks.
And underscores why ongoing research is just so vital. We need the full picture.
Absolutely. Which leaves us and you with a pretty big thought to consider. These drugs are incredibly popular. Their use is skyrocketing. So if this link is confirmed by more research, what are the wider implications for society, for treatment guidelines? And, maybe just as importantly, how should future research be designed to really get us the answers we need to navigate this?